Hi, I'm David Goforth with Cooperative Extension Successful Gardener. Today I'm going to be following up on the tree segment that I did earlier. Earlier we looked at trees that were down in low areas, and today we're in an upland area. You can find the other tree segment on the internet at the county website by clicking on the Channel 22 icon. The upland area we chose is actually Dunn Mountain, which is in neighboring Rowan County, about a 40-minute drive from Concord, our offices there in Concord. Dunn Mountain is sort of interesting, actually. You get a pretty good view up here. If you knew where to look, you could see Mara Mountain down in Stanley County, some of the mountains over in Montgomery County, Baldface Mountain in Davison County, on up Sourtown Mountain, Pilot Mountain, and on a very clear day you can see Mount Mitchell or Grandfather Mountain. They estimated maybe 5 days out of the year you can see Grandfather Mountain, and less than that you can actually see Rome Mountain, Tennessee, from this mountain up here. So it's a pretty good view of that, and also of the town of Salisbury, and you can see the Spencer train shops from this location. So it's a fairly interesting view here, but it's also got a good selection of trees that grow in fairly upland areas. There are approximately 31 different species of oaks in North Carolina. This type of oak tree here is one of the red oaks, and the red oak family has actually got little points on the leaves, sort of like a little barb on the leaves here around, compared to the white oak family, which has got lobes, and compared to the chestnut oak, which we'll see later, which has also got lobes. This one right here, I think, is a scarlet oak based on the depth of these margins in here. You see how they come in very tight here compared to your northern red oak, which is fairly wide here. And it's got a short petiole. The petiole is apart from the stem to the leaf. This is the blade of the leaf, and this part here is called the petiole, and it's got a very short petiole. The true pin oak has a leaf that looks a lot like this, but the petiole is about 50% the length of the leaf. We've got some pin oaks up there at the Piedmont Farmers Market for comparison. But again, I think this is a scarlet oak. There's a number of oaks that look fairly familiar. I know it is in the red oak family. The other common oak we have is the southern red oak, which has got a bell shape right here. And this one has got a little bit of a bell shape here, but I don't think it's got much in the way of southern red oak in it. Sometimes your oaks will hybridize back and forth, and they make more of a tribe as opposed to individual species. But this one here is pretty clear-cut type of scarlet oak here, genetics or phenotype on this. Your oaks are very good trees. A lot of your oaks, most of your oaks are very good trees. They are the dominant tree. If we had to pick a dominant tree for our forest here in Cabarrus County, once you come through the grass stage and the shrub stage and the pine stage, they'll switch over to oak hickory, and we call it an oak hickory forest a lot of times. A lot of the major oak trees are some of our structural, very strong, used in construction, used for furniture, dimensional lumber, those type of things. For also some of your fine furniture is oak furniture, and these will produce acorns that are very useful for wildlife, and another use for this particular tree. So a very common and popular citizen of our forest here, and also makes a nice ornamental. A lot of times you don't see this in the very driest locations. Here the water collects on the top of this hill a little bit in a way that will get these oaks, allow these red oaks to grow. But you'll see typically the chestnut oak, which we're going to look at in a minute, will be in a little bit drier sites, and then white oaks, and then finally the red oaks will be where they get a little bit more moisture, down a little bit from the very peaks of our forest around here. Let's take a look at this neighboring tree that's in the same area here. This tree right here is the sassafras tree, and a lot of people have heard of sassafras trees. It can be identified by fairly unique leaf shapes. We've got one leaf that is simple, what we call a simple leaf, elliptic leaf. You also look on here, you can see some leaves that have got like one finger to them, and some leaves that have got like 3 fingers to them, sort of a mitten shape, and then a double mitten shape, if you will, on the tree. And there's only a couple of trees in our forest that will do this. Sassafras is one, and it's the one with a smooth edge. If you saw a similar pattern, but it was a ragged edge, that would be our mulberry tree. Sassafras is famous for being a drink, or at least a flavoring for a drink at one time. They come through and they found that it was proven carcinogen when they fed it to mice, but they fed it at wheelbarrow loads. You'd have to drink wheelbarrow loads of the tea to get that point. I don't drink a lot of the tea myself, but I've tasted it before. Don't think it'd be a problem to taste it. And you make the tea actually from the roots. You take the roots and wash them and soak them to make the tea. Some people claim they can take the twig and get a flavor of the sassafras taste from the twig. I don't notice that taste as much as I do from the root myself. It's a beautiful little tree, but it's very hard to transplant and hard to get growing. So most of what we see in our landscapes is either sort of naturalized there or somebody's been fairly persistent. They've got a nice yellow bloom to them, but it's not really that spectacular. It's just a real interesting plant that we share the world with. Let's take a look at some of these other trees here. This tree is a yellow poplar. It's a very common tree that grows across Cabarrus County. Will grow down in very wet areas, and as you can see here, on up into some fairly dry areas also. It is one that is used for lumber and for pallet wood now. Used to, they would actually take the bark off these trees and use them for buckets. The early settlers did in this area. This is a beautiful tree. It normally has some nice yellow fall color, but the term yellow poplar is more a reference to the wood itself. A lot of these colors on trees were named by people in sawmills, and when you cut this, it does have a yellow color to begin with, but it rapidly becomes very dark. I've seen cabinets made out of this that will be as dark as walnut within 2 or 3 years of exposure to light. So it starts off very white, then goes very dark when it's used in something like that. And it's a softer wood that's not commonly used for that particular purpose. They make nice landscape trees when they're young, but they don't age very well. They'll go into middle age, but as they go into old age, they become fairly brittle and prone for the top to break out during later years. So I've seen them used, but they're not commonly used as much as the maples and the oaks. Yellow poplar has a distinctive leaf shape. If you see this leaf shape, you'll be able to always recognize it as a poplar tree. The leaf will remind you a little bit of a tulip, but the reason it's called a tulip poplar is actually because of the bloom. The bloom will bloom in the spring. It's a large bloom, and is one of the most useful plants for bees. Bees will start collecting this and collect on it for about a 30-day period, and each bloom will give almost a teaspoon of nectar for the bees. So an excellent bee tree that beekeepers will look for when they're placing beehives around the county. This tree right here is actually one of the more difficult ones for beginners to identify. This is the black gum, and the tree that you confuse it with is the persimmon. The black gum and the persimmon have very similar leaves, but if you look at all the leaves on the tree, you'll find that a lot of times the black gum has the widest part beyond the middle. We call this obovate, but you have the widest part beyond the middle, and you have a simple leaf here, an alternate leaf arrangement like we talked about in our other segment, and basically just a tree that you sort of have to look at the smooth bark here. As it gets older, the bark gets rougher, but you can look at that and identify this as a black gum. The black gum originally, when they get old, they get the interior hollows out, and they used them to put bees in, and that's where the term bee gum come from. Black gum, I think, was named first, and then bee gum come from black gum. Black gums will color up very early in the year. During years when they have a lot of energy, you'll actually see some good purple color on black gum. One of the best trees for purple color, but it's not real commonly used in the landscape. It doesn't have a real distinctive bloom or a real conspicuous bloom. The fruit is mainly on the tree is either entirely male or entirely female. So you do have female fruit, which birds like, and I've been told bears like it. We don't have bears in this area. Don't know personally about that, but I've been told that bears will eat the fruit off of a black gum also. It is a very tough wood. If you use it for firewood, it's very difficult to split. Also being tough, in years past, it was used for wagon rims when they would, before they could put iron around a wagon rim, or situation they didn't have iron around a wagon rim, they would actually put black gum around the wagon rim and use that because it was such a hard wood and would protect the wagon wheel wood from that. The other use for this tree is as a toothbrush tree, believe it or not. It's a very common use. People would chew on the little twigs until it would become a fuzzy brush that they could use to brush their teeth with, or as my grandma would do, she would dip snuff with that particular brush there. So you hear some people talk about a toothbrush tree. The black gum is the one that they're talking about. There's several black gums up here on this site, and there's quite a diversity in black gum leaves. I was noticing one on the other side of the mountain that was a very long linear leaf, but it was also a black gum. And not in Cabarrus County, but maybe 30, 40, 50 miles up the road, you'll see some of them that'll get a little bit of a loop down here in them, almost a, beyond a simple one, almost to a leaf that is got a little bit of a bulb here at the base. So quite a bit of difference in the leaves, but this is the black gum and a very beautiful tree. One thing about a black gum, you'll notice that if you ever cut one down, you'll get a lot of root sprouts from around the black gum, which is not desirable in a landscape tree, but it's just something you have to live with if you like this particular tree. This little tree is a favorite tree. It's not real common in Cabarrus County, but it's possible that you would see one. This is a sourwood, and I don't know exactly why it gets its name, but if I had permission to take a leaf and chew it, it would taste very sour. So possibly that's the way it got its name there, as a sourwood. You'll see there's some fruit up here on the tree. This is where the blooms were at, and the blooms are very well known for sourwood honey. There's actually a lot more sourwood honey sold than there's actually made, but this is a tree that if you could ever taste the true sourwood honey, you would find it had a distinctive taste to it. A lot of stuff labeled sourwood won't have that taste, and is actually a mixture of some other honeys in there with it. But if you get the true sourwood and get the distinctive taste, it's something that you would remember from the tree also. You can see we're starting to get a little bit of fall color here, and between the blooms in the spring and the fall color, a lot of people love this tree, and I've seen it planted in the landscapes. It's not commonly sold in nurseries, but they can normally get it for you if you're interested, and it will grow very readily in Cabarrus County. As you can see on this site here, it grows in very poor conditions, very shallow, thin soils, and doesn't take a whole lot to keep it going, but it is a nice tree. The dominant oak up here on Dunn Mountain is actually a type of chestnut oak. And I have never seen a chestnut oak in Cabarrus County. I think they are there, and I just haven't been in the right place. But a chestnut oak, the leaf is fairly distinctive in that it'll give you this rolled edge like this. There is actually a swamp white oak will look fairly similar on the edge, and we've got some of those in Cabarrus County. But this oak has got a rough bark when it gets older, smooth bark when it's younger, rough bark when it gets older, and very easy to tell from the swamp white oak because of the bark. But the leaf here is rolled leaf like this, which is the chestnut oak. The leaf is somewhat similar to a true chestnut leaf, which is the way it's got it. But you can tell the difference between the chestnut. The chestnuts will have a point or a hair on the end of each lobe, which the chestnut oaks will not. And again, the fruit is quite a bit different. This is the fruit on the chestnut oak right here. It is a very large acorn, and it falls very early in the year. In fact, it has already fallen in mid-September now, and will continue to fall for a few more weeks. The wildlife does not like this very well, but it's the first one to fall, so they'll start eating on this one. But as soon as the red oaks start falling, they will swap to the red oaks, and then when the white oaks start falling, the wildlife will swap to the white oaks, and eventually come back, and they may clean these up in January, February time frame, because they are the least desirable of the acorns in the woods. The chestnut oak will be used again for any of the reasons that white oak and red oak are used. It's not quite as desirable as white oak and red oak, and because it grows in very dry sites, it doesn't grow very rapidly either. It's also cut for firewood, and for some reason they've cut the chestnut oaks off this hill several years ago, and mostly what we're seeing here again is root sprouts that have come up from older chestnut oak stumps. This shrubby little tree here is an Avalancher tree. Avalancher is better known as a serviceberry or a Juneberry. A lot of speculation on where the name service comes from, but I actually think it's from the French service berry. You'll hear it also called serviceberry. So they speculate about it being wedding services or funeral services or what have you, and I think they've totally missed the boat on that. But whatever, it's a beautiful little tree. It blooms white in the spring of the year, and this is one of the rarest trees that I've seen in Cabarrus County. I've actually seen 3 specimens in the last 20 years in Cabarrus County, a couple of them up there in Kannapolis near Ridge Avenue, and one about 4 or 5 miles west of Kannapolis. So they're very rare trees, but they will grow very readily, and you can buy hybrids of this in the nursery industry. And actually, surprisingly, the hybrids, which were chosen for better blooms, also actually taste a little bit better than the wild serviceberry. Very useful for birds, and I think a very good addition to your landscape. The berry is about the size of a blueberry, but it's got a distinctive, strange taste. It's obvious that you're not tasting the blueberry when you taste it. On Dunn Mountain, you can find this tree right at the end of what they call the Quarry Overlook, but it's also available, or hybrids are available at local nurseries in Cabarrus County. If you have any questions about any of these trees or tree identification, you feel free to call me at the Extension office. And until next time, plan and plant for a better world.